podcast brought to you by Melee Stats. I am Gimme Dat Wheat. I'm going to be your host today. I'm a top 100 organizer, tournament seeder, and just a huge fan of Melee. And if the people who are watching this on Twitch or watching the video on YouTube will recognize that today's episode already is kind of a little different than what we normally do. With me today is not Edwin Budding. It's not Ambi Sinister. It's just one other person. Melee Stats, we have been so grateful to all the people who have been able to be guests on the show and just help us throughout our entire times in Melee. And I think it's really important to us to hear from them and just hear their stories. So what I'm going to do today with today's episode, and something that Melee Stats might be doing with Waiting for Game in the future, we're going to have one-on-one conversations with people who in some way or another really mean a lot to us. And for this, I couldn't choose anyone but Tafokints, CLG's own Tafo. What is up, Tafo? How have you been?
Could be better. I didn't get Bud Light Ace this week, so it's nice. But yeah, good to be on. I had a little bit of an awe moment when you guys talked about me meaning a lot to you guys. So glad to just be on the show with you guys and just chat.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is basically coming up to be like sort of a meme that I hope it doesn't come off like that. But I just been so lucky in terms of who we've been able to get on here because so many people have been so instrumental in getting me into the scene. But like I said, if I had to pick one person who was probably most important for me to really dig deep into the scene, I gotta say, Tafo, that's probably you.
Oh, wow. I actually didn't know that. And I'm glad because I think, I started doing content. I realized I couldn't do it, forever. And I thought hey, hopefully, this inspires other people to do things because I think, the more people that are involved in this stuff, the better. So I'm really happy that there is another generation of people that are really, carrying the torch.
The Tafostats.
The Tafostats.
Yeah. You kind of hit on all of that. I think that I think it's a large role to take. I'm not sure if I'm going to let you say that we're carrying the torch on, but as best as we can. But yeah, I want to get into all this today. I think you as a person, you as a figure in Melee has been so important. And I just want to get into this. So I guess the first thing is, you talked about how, what you've done for the scene. How did you get into the scene is probably the best first question for this.
Yeah, I think it was a classic story of my friends and I were, playing a lot of 64 in Melee. And when just to get an edge, I was like, okay, what are other people doing online? And this is before the YouTube era.
Damn.
And eventually my search went to Smashboards, and I both discovered two things. I discovered Isaiah in both 64 and Melee, and then also the San Jose State bi-weekly tournaments that Sheridan used to run back in 04. Kind of crazy that he's been doing this for 17 years. And so, yeah, those were my two gateways into competitive Smash.
Wow. That's crazy. So I think it's amazing to hear everyone's first entrance into Smash, and I think it's really funny because a lot of it is kind of based upon just wanting to beat whoever friend you're playing, whichever friend's kind of has the edge on you. And I guess you as a player, we talked about this with Homemade Waffles last week. You would be perfect as this person who's kind of underrated as a player, and I think most people know you as someone who's a figure in the scene. So what was how did that happen? How did you turn from someone who obviously played the game really well, but someone who's also able to bring something larger to the scene?
Yeah, I think as you get more involved, I think you get more attached to the community. And then as you get more attached, you want to help it the best you can. And so I helped run tournaments in NorCal when there weren't really good venues. So I think a large part is being able to identify what the community needs, the people you go play with, the people you go to Denny's after a tournament with, the people you chat with on Discord, Facebook Messenger, whatever avenue, AIM back in the day. And so, yeah, I always had a heart for seeing how can we create a better fun experience for everybody.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think when I look back at those types of that era, obviously something that I was not there for this early era. it's so cool seeing all the old stuff, all the old footage of like a Genesis or even something smaller, because in terms of numbers, obviously whatever we're doing right now dwarfs it completely. But you look at that and it felt like everyone kind of had a role in the scene. Uh, you know, in a tournament of like 200 people, it feels like 100 of them have like some larger impact in the scene. And I think it's crazy to look back at those old tournaments and feel that energy.
Yeah, I mean, I think a large part was that was like super helpful, right? It was like when I first went to my first tournament, I'm just a scrub. I mean, I think it was a lot easier to like win tournament sets back then, so I didn't go 0 and 2 right away. Like I think I went like 1 and 2 or 2 and 2. Like not everyone was like super good. And I remember going to Jack in the Box, which was near the tournament, and Maiko, Silent Spectre, Vanessa, and Lunin just said like, "Hey, do you want to like sit at our table?" And if those like kind of micro interactions didn't happen, I probably would have had a second opinion, because I've been involved in Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and a bunch of other communities where you're kind of just left fending for yourself for a while, and just to see people like invested, it's like, hey, do you want to go grab a bite to eat? Do you want to come with us? It, I think, really opened the door for me, and I definitely felt like really welcomed, and it helped me like stick around right from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, I don't think that there's a way where I would still be involved in Melee without the community. I mean, as we go through the ups and downs, you will probably know that more than almost anyone.
Yeah.
But like, if I have to look at what the memories I have from this, there's a lot of great times of just like watching intense sets or something like that. But I mean, more stuff of just like hanging out afterwards, or like a major hotel room or something like that, just like shoving 8 people in. Like, I think the experiences outside of the game are so important. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think like I would probably say that if we were to just keep it to what you've done for the scene, we talked about you as a player, you talked about yourself as an organizer. I would say Top 100 is probably one of the lasting things that you have put into the scene that has really shown dividends. What was the impetus for this? Like, why did you start this?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. What was it? I think the first year I did that was like 2013, and I think that's when I realized Smash wasn't really as insular, like in terms of there was a lot of outside interest. Like we got into Evo that year, we reached news, like we had the Spirit Bomb, and so I realized like that year in particular that there were a lot of people that were watching. Evo 2013 that year, I think, hit 70K viewers, and like I just never imagined that would ever happen. And I kind of thought to myself, I've talked to my friends who weren't involved in Smash, and they're like, they didn't know anything about the game, they didn't know anything about the players. And you and I, we can go around and identify who are the good players, the sleeper hits, and people knew like Mango, Armada, HBox, or in like PP, or like the Five Gods, right? And
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, no one knew anything about anyone. And I'm thinking like, what do like traditional sports do? And I know people meme like it's like traditional sports and esports aren't the same thing, but on ESPN they had the top 100 or NBA rank, and that gives a larger context to players that aren't like LeBron James or Steph Curry, right? Like you get to see a reasonable order of
To
players
find out where
around
the
the.
Gary Paytons of the world fall in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or like the Sloxes and the people who are from like New England, tri-state, all these regions that aren't getting recognized. And like Melee is just more than the Five Gods. And I thought that having a list, and I knew from the get-go it wasn't going to be perfect. There was going to be controversy. A guy that's ranked 90th could probably be 50th. A guy that's 50th might be 70th. But at the very least, it gives two things. Like like top 100 back then wasn't as difficult. There wasn't as many people. If you play for like a couple years, you'd probably get on. It created a goalpost beyond the local scene, where like a local scene could have like a top 10, right? And then what do you do after that? It's like you want to get onto the national scene. So I thought that was a good segue and a good challenge, and also created just a good talking point for people to have a frame of reference. And I think everybody uses a top 100 as like a frame of reference, for better or worse. And I wanted to be a storyboard launcher into other things, right? So if people write about Smash and not super familiar with the scene, they can look at that as like a narrative builder. Oh, this guy first hit top 100 in 2013, rose up the ranks, and it creates a good story builder. It's like a great default sauce to like a meal.
Yeah, I mean, I really cannot imagine doing this in 2013. Obviously, I introduce myself as a top 100 organizer. That was a role that you kind of onboarded me on, to. I was very lucky to be able to work with you on it for a little bit, and then obviously continuing to do it with practical tasks. So I kind of like feel like I get a little bit of the ins and outs of it, but I cannot imagine doing it in 2013 and saying let's do a top 100. But what happened from it, what that top 100 brought, you're so right. Like the scene has benefited so much from that in a way that I think it's like ingrained. The top 100 is so ingrained in people that this is the first, 2020 was the first year without one for obvious reasons, and
Yeah.
people people weren't having it, trying to make their own net play rankings and stuff like that. So I think like it's so important to the scene in so many ways, and what we've seen from like just the history, you can see a Zane who's obviously a top 5 player, I mean top 1 maybe, but you can look at his career obviously starting as like 66th and then working his way up to 22nd or whatever, and I think that what you were able to do for this and the lasting impact of it is huge on the history of the game.
Yeah. And I think the other part, if you look at the history of Melee, like even if you look at the early days of like Matt Deasy and all of them, Alpha Zela, like they use Smash. I mean, like Melee is like a hobby, both like for a lot of people, both on the player end and like on this, like the behind the scenes end. And I think what I also want to do with SSBM Rank is give a lot of people an opportunity, like, cause I think we had a lot of really young writers, editors, and people that contributed, and now they could say like, oh, like this went up on Red Bull, and like I think a lot of people were able to get their first jobs because of this experience, where like I wrote them a letter of recommendation, said like this person did really great work on this, you could see it on the Red Bull site. And so being able to like actually provide jobs and funding to people and just experience, I did pay some people, it wasn't fully for exposure. I think that that's like really awesome, right? Like if you're 17 to 20 and like you've never gone paid doing esports, or you don't have any work history, like where do you begin? And I thought that was also very important for me in doing this as well.
Would you say, is the top 100 the thing that you in Smash that you hold as like most important that you've done, or how do you view your accomplishments?
Yeah, I mean, as a player, like I've hit top 32 in majors, like I hit 17th at Shine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think a lot of people don't recognize that about me. Like I beat Ralph, who was top 100 at my last tournament, despite not playing the game for like a year. Lost to Moki and Mewtwo King at Genesis. So I think as a player, like I did accomplish a lot. Like I mean, as a meme, I'm 1-0 against IBDW. I'm 1-0 against None.
Rishi, aren't you up on Rishi too?
Yeah, I'm 1-0 on Rishi, 1-0 on Crush. Like, and of course, they would easily beat me today. Like, I've done a lot as a player, but I think over the years, like there was this drive to be like, oh, like I want to get ranked in NorCal, SoCal, which was really hard at the time. Definitely, a stepping stone that was really hard to do given how stacked those regions were, and I eventually did it. But I think over time, and I think this is an earlier question you brought up, is like how did I transition? So like I want to be okay, right? Like at the very least, like I want to go to tournament and beat Crimson Blur and beat other people and be like,
Don't we
no,
all?
But I felt the competitive drive to be the best wasn't really quite there for me, because I knew that like, I think that summer of 2016, I'd probably put myself in the top 50 just with my performances. But to get to top 20, to get to top 10, that means my nights would have to go to Smash Fest. I would have to study. I would have to grind, and the amount of time you need to just keep jumping levels is like exponential. And I just didn't really feel like my drive matched that level of play. So yeah, I don't really have much pride in my competitive aspirations, although like it's like a footnote. I think the biggest thing for me in Smash is like it'd probably be the top 100 in terms of the reach, but just making sure that, I think more than that, like I showed that narrative writing and content building and story writing for these players and the stakes of events, I think that's probably the biggest thing for me. And when I wrote on all those articles on Melee and on me, especially when I covered the MLG series, like I always said, like, what's at stake here, right? Like, what is the story to tell here? And I think I nailed it pretty well because I'm pretty connected with the players, so I got to talk to them. So it's like cheating, but I think I really opened the door to like that market of writing where people are interested in that stuff. And I built the proof of concept to say like, yo, like you can write about this stuff. Like there are a ton of people that really want to know this stuff and will watch content on it. So you guys turn down for Walt, like all you guys, and like I feel like are like partially influenced by me. Like not, I'm not going to take full credit, and that's the biggest joy I have, right? Is that people are writing about the deep stuff of Melee.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really nailed it with that one, because the way that I viewed all that type of stuff when I first got into the scene was so instrumental to me understanding the scene, and to me like really be able to dig into it. The lore, I guess, was, if you want to put it that way, or just the depth that the scene had, just seemed something that was like perfect for me to really, dig myself into. And I think that you are known so much as the stat person, but beyond that, you are able to give context for all that in a way that I think might get misunderstood on a larger level, right? I'm not sure if everyone would jump to give you the credit for like creating narratives or highlighting narratives.
Yep.
But I mean, I think you're definitely right. That comes like part and parcel with the stats that you're able to put out, and yeah, I think that was pretty amazing. What about Tafostats? We talk about what you brought to the scene. We're not obviously without even
Yeah.
touching on Melee and on me, but Tafostats is something that has a lasting impact, and we see PG stats. We have SmashData.gg. I don't know if you know about that, and we just got all these things that are kind of on the basis of wanting to know like exactly how many times Kobol wrecked Gatsu, like something that
Yeah.
is like the minutia that for some reason the Melee scene like cannot stop hounding over.
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally forgot that I did that. Like, I actually like totally forgot I created a stat site. It's kind of crazy. That actually came out of anger for me, strangely enough, because no offense to like my boys Toph and Scar, I love them, but like when Toph and Scar would reference something in 2014, like it was always wrong, and I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't also pinpoint what the right answer was in terms of set counts, and so I thought to myself like I was mad initially, and then I was a little bit more empathetic because I'm like, there's no way that they would be able to know this on their own. There's a lot of stuff you need to know. But I was like, like I wonder if I can do something with it. And I think for me, like I think largely the themes I'm seeing as we're like talking about this is like I like to start stuff as a proof of concept. I'll put in a lot of work to see like and build interest, and then at the end of the day, I hope that somebody takes over that like is gonna scale it more than me. So happy that there's stats. I'm happy that on PG stats I can look up stuff on Liquipedia, because I think there's a ton of people that like to look into history, and I think the beauty of our game Melee, it's patchless. And similar to all the tennis analogies that you have of what's this guy's record over time, like we have the luxury at looking at the progression, not only in the ranking standpoint, but in the head-to-head trajectory of these players. And I still think there's a lot to uncover and all that, and I think that's part of the reason why I want to do the stats is to uncover a deeper history of the progression of players, the head-to-heads, especially with like the five gods when they played against each other. One player might have a really big jump over another player, and then it reverses at some period of time, and being able to pinpoint that on the tip of your fingers is really nice. So that was like the inspiration behind Tafostats when I was running it.
Yeah, I think it's huge, and I think we mentioned how the top 100 gives you the ability to see the growth of all these players, and I think the same thing with Tafostats. I think the ability to look at someone's records and just see how over time maybe it goes from like 0-4 to 1-3, and then suddenly jumps and scales. I think like it really tells a story in a way, even if you just look at individual set counts versus one person, and what you're able to bring to the scene with that is very admirable.
Yeah.
Obviously, Tafostats, you have. I don't want to say you've taken time off from Melee, because obviously you're still your role in Melee has obviously not been as large, due to other amazing things that you've been doing. What do you think about the role of stats that they play today? It is what can be done better? What do you think is done well right now? Like I want to hear your opinions on this, considering it's been a few years since you were really doing heavy stats for the scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things, and I think when I was coaching Mango, like just me having access to my own database and running my own search queries, like I mean, that's how I was able to quickly get to the conclusion that like if Mango loses FD in a certain way, like he's going to tilt the next two games, and it was not only like very easily observable, like when somebody watches that, they're not going to be able to pick up on that pattern right away. And so I was like, huh, like let me look at the data sets, and it was a very big confirmation. So like that's why you saw like the Mario counterpick on Yoshi on
The on
FD,
FD.
because I know that also from observing Axe that if he gets chain grabbing tilts Axe and it gets him really scared. So playing a character that fundamentally can chain grab his character, I knew was going to do something to his mindset. And like it was like I just looked at the data set of him against like ice climbers, like what caused him to tilt, and do a lot of investigation. I got Mingo to stop picking Stadium in certain matchups against like Marth as his first counter pick. I got him to stop picking Yoshi's against Armada. So there's a lot of like things with the data that you can play around with that if you investigate further, like there's still I can't really reveal strategies, but like there's a lot of strange counter picks that still happen where like I think they're picking based on the character matchup more than the player tendencies that I think can be explored. Slippy stats is also amazing, or like what Slippy's done. I think for me, like I played a little bit of Slippy. My like kills per my number of punishes that lead into or openings that lead into kills is really bad, which shows that my punish game is really lacking. I think it's like 6 or 7 on average. So that tells me that I need to work on my punish game. And so I think there's a lot of things you can do to maybe it doesn't confirm or definitively tell you weaknesses or strengths about your games, but it is like a almost like a smoking gun to like if you want to improve in the game, like having that just bare bones right in front of you is like super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so you mentioned coaching Mango, and just as a brief aside, we talk about what you have considered your biggest accomplishment in the scene, or something that you've been maybe most proud of, maybe most impactful, might be the right word.
Yep.
You've done so much that I think it's really hard to like just at one go say everything you've done for the scene. What do you like? What do you think has been underappreciated? I mean, maybe it is the stats. Like,
Yeah, I
what?
mean, I think the most like frustrating narrative, and this has kind of come up recently on like the Reddit sphere, is like I made Mango, um, and I think like if I were to like defend or redeem myself, like there are a lot of things I focus on as like a KPI, like or like this is what I would consider a successful year. So I think the first 2 to 3 tournaments after Genesis, like that year, like I had to go to weddings. So like the February tournaments, like I was effectively not coaching him. But the goals I had was like I didn't want him to lose to anyone worse than top 10. And the year before that, and the year after I stopped coaching him, he was losing to a lot of like top 15, top 20, top 50 players. And so like I was trying to make him as consistent as possible. And I think despite the fact that he didn't perform as well, like I think I did that. His worst losses for a while were Chudat, Plup, and Axe, and they're all top 10 players. And so when people say like he's lost a lot, like I think people forget that he used to get upset a lot by like random players, and I absolutely made sure that didn't happen. Made sure that his routines were good. That I made him play Falco because I knew that a 6 out of 10 Mango Falco would win. But I knew if he played a 6 out of 10 Fox that he was going to lose to like barely beat Wizzy, barely beat Lucky, and barely beat a lot of these players. So I felt like I did a lot for him. And funny enough, there's a funny story about the most recent summit where Bennis, Bennis W, who's a Mango
Yeah,
super
yeah.
fan. I told Bennis W my routine with Red Bull and shots.
And the
If you
vodka.
guys, yeah, for people who are watching this, the TLDR is at the beginning of my coaching tenure. Mango wants to stop drinking, and so we experimented a lot with routines, like when he would eat, what type of snacks he would eat during the day, water, bathroom breaks, gum. Like there's a lot of things that Mango has in his routine that's kind of ritualistic. Like for whatever reason, he always has to go to the bathroom before a set. So if you're a tournament organizer, most frustrating thing, because like you have him there and he's like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom, but it's part of his routine. He'll listen to music, go to the bathroom. Um, but we try to get rid of the alcohol, and he got really anxious and he lost the tournament because he overthought. So I was like, oh fuck, like, sorry for swearing. I was like, okay, like
Fuck it,
it's
do
gonna
it.
it's gonna take a lot of work to make not drinking work. So I was like thinking, okay, like knowing that he's going to need alcohol, we experimented with like, okay, let's give you some alcohol, right? I think it was Smash and Splash, a tournament that ended really late, and alcohol slows you down, and he just had no energy. So I was just like, ugh, like okay, like if I don't give him alcohol, he's going to overthink. But if I give it to him too, and the tournament starts too late, then he's just not going to have energy. So I had to do this routine where it's like Red Bull 1 hour, and then or it's like two shots initially to get that buzz for him, and it'll fade off by the time he plays the sets, and then an hour later I'll give him Red Bull, and if the tournament's running late, then I'll give him another beer, and then if the tournament's still running late, there's a Red Bull like in there. So it's like a little routine just to match his energy level. It's like a Balmer's curve. But Ben SW actually had beer and Red Bull, and he had the sauce and actually did that for him at the tournament. I'm not sure if it kept him focused, but it's a routine that he still holds to this day.
And obviously, we saw the results of Summit 11.
Yeah.
They kind of speak for themselves. Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who is willing to throw stones at you and say anything about why you're the reason why Mango wasn't doing particularly well, oh yeah, that always grinded my gears.
Yeah.
Can't say yeah. Go on.
It was the darn Swedish people. The other big part of that year, if I remember correctly, where I think that was like the first year where you notice at the top that the punish game was getting noticeably better. Like Leffen and Armada's punish games were just getting absolutely better. And
this would be like 2017, right?
It was
2016.
It was like I forget what it was, like 2016, 2017. Yeah, like you were seeing like Leffen land like 70 damage off of just one thing, and the one thing that was different from him and like Lucky before that was like his damage was consistent. And I knew that Mango needs to streamline a lot. And I think a lot of people said like he's playing conservative, like he's playing slower, and it was a deliberate decision because he was kind of just winging a lot of situations. Where if you look at his Falco now, like he knows exactly what he needs to do. There's a little bit of improving and like creative mix-ups, but he needed to be in a place where he understands like exactly what he can and can't do. And if you watch that era of videos, like especially early on, he was getting shine out of shielded because the shield pressure wasn't safe. His punish game wasn't consistent because people were DIing a certain way, right? And one of the big points I want to emphasize for him is that his punish game needs to be more consistent, and the way he goes about flowcharting his game needs to be a lot more consistent. And then once that stabilizes itself, then he can add the creative elements back in. And that was like really important for me to establish for him when I was his coach, because if the fundamentals aren't there and like the left in Hungry Box and Armada continue to keep developing that, then he's going to fall behind, and those creative options are just not going to work anymore.
Yeah, I think it's so enlightening to have you talk about this, because without you as his coach, I do think we'd lose out on a lot of these moments of clarity to kind of understand what's going on deeper. And I think that's, obviously this is something that still happens, like any top level play, this is still going on. But yeah, I mean, I didn't realize it until now that having you as the very vocal coach, I think was really helpful for a lot of people to understand what was going on. Even if, the idea of like giving him vodka and Red Bull might have seemed like, I don't think Reddit was too kind about that all the time, but I think like this is it was a really illuminating thing to have you be able to speak about that all the time. Obviously, like that's continuing at the top level in some maybe not specific routines, but like what have you have to say about what is happening right now in 2021 Melee? Like if you were still as active in Smash, if you had the the stats or whatever, like how do you think you would vocalize about what's happening in 2021?
Like among just the general kind of player base that goes to tournaments, or like at the very top? I can give you both.
Both would be fine. Yeah.
So I mean, I think for context, I think I have that pretty good like time travel experience because I haven't really touched Melee in the past like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so going from 2018 Melee, playing a Genesis, getting like, what was it, 97th, and then going to play now, like I would say overall the game's gone a lot faster. And I think in 2018, there are a few things, and I thought about making a video. Everyone crouch cancels, and everyone's just like really good at picking a really precise like out of shield options. So if I hit a fox a certain way, they're always going to crouch cancel or they're going to shine out of shield, right? And they're going to punish me. So there's a lot less freebies that you can get away with now in 2021, even with just like a common net player. The other part that has come up with the better players is I think you kind of break people into defensive foxes and aggressive foxes. The foxes are in your face and the foxes that shoot lasers, right? But I feel like everybody kind of plays at this zone. And I think the Mango versus Zane set highlights this a lot, where every time Mango got Zane in a corner, he didn't run away and shoot lasers.
Mm-hmm.
He dash danced and played at such a pressure aggressive level where like he's trying to force something out of Zane. Old school melee would be like, I'm gonna walk away half a screen away or like 3/4 of screen away, and I know approaching's hard, and I know that you're not good at it, and I'm gonna rely on the law of averages to say that you're gonna mess up your approach at me, and then I'm gonna punish you. That's the Armada style. That's the Leffen style. To a loose extent, Muti King and Hungry Box. But you can't play melee that way anymore at the top. You have to play aggressive. You have to force mistakes through pressure. And that's like the biggest difference I see in neutral is that people are playing up close and they're reacting to options and then punishing you for it. Whereas I thought back then in the old days, like people would play mid distance and rely on people overextending and then punishing. So that's probably the biggest difference I see. Defensive options are great. People are sliding off if they can. If there's an option that exists that can get them out of a combo, they'll do it. And granted, the offensive player or the person continuing the combo could recognize and react to it. But like, if you're not in tune with what options are available for the defensive player, like your combos are just getting cut shorter, and you have to cover a lot more to get a lot more out of your combos. So those are like the biggest things I see.
So, you had a were they called Tafofacts? Was that what it was, or is it still just Tafostats? You would have something that would run across the bottom of like an Apex 2015
yeah,
or something.
I don't remember. It was like Gimmer wrote it. It might have been Tafofacts at the time that he wrote. It was whatever Gimmer wrote.
Whatever it was, yeah, I think that idea is something that was kind of in a lot of Smashers' heads. And being able to see that was super cool. If that was happening right now, with what we're able to currently see, we have this kind of interesting situation because we have so much information through Slippy, like you mentioned, and so many other websites that are able to gather like set data, like broad set data. Like, how would you visualize what's going on currently through data?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's interesting because like I think there's a magical sauce to like what makes the top players what they are, as opposed to like the average top 50 player, right? Like when you describe Mango's Falco versus like Mango's like I don't know, like Ginger's Falco. Ginger's good, right? Or like Magi, right? Um like Zane on FD, right? That's a classic one. What I would do is like I would highlight his openings per kill on that stage versus other stages, right? It's probably gonna be substantially lower. And that segues into like a nice talking point for the commentators, right? For like if you're on a Summit screen stream where a lot of people aren't familiar with melee, right? They say, oh wow, like Zane on average gets a kill on like 1.8 openings, right? Like that's a really interesting talking point, and like that broadly goes into like what makes Mart so good at FD. With Mango, right? Like if you can aggregate like how does he get his openings, right? And he has like 9 different types, and like we were able to stat this and say like, oh, Ginger gets like 3.5, has 3 ways he gets openings, right? And we see Mango have 9. It's right. Like then you can talk about Mango's mix-ups, right? And I think the commentators, for what it's worth, like I really liked Logan or LSD, like talking about player pattern and tendencies. But I think if they're able to use stats not to like create a random narrative, but to enhance the narratives that I think we all have in the back of our minds of like what makes this player special or what makes this player top 5, then I think that really enhances things. Like another example I would give for SFAT is like his win-loss record against people lower than him and his win-loss record against people above him, right? He probably has one of the most polarizing stats for that particular stat, which tells me that he is a very consistent player, has a really distinct game plan, but because it's so regimented, his execution probably isn't going to be able to let him beat players that are better than him because his game plan isn't as good.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing with that is that there are a lot of people out there who the larger melee scene will probably be able to figure out the general narrative about the player through just watching their play. But then you have SFAT, like the perfect example of someone who I think that maybe just by watching the play or just by looking at the general tournament history, I don't think SFAT would be able to be really easy to tell apart from a group of other foxes or people in his level. And I think that like the idea of picking specific stats to show like what is unique about these players is yeah, I mean that's like an amazing idea. And you have these players who might kind of struggle to break apart from the pack in terms of their individuality, and like focusing on what makes them special, what makes their game different through those stats. I think that would be amazing.
Yep. I think this is like funny because I know um I think the funny part about all this is I think in like business world, like you have the engine, like it's like I mean, I think this is like kind of a caricature, but like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, you have the salesperson versus like the engineer, right? And I know that there's like some kind of like things with Drug Fox that kind of come up where he would be like the engineer, right? And I think if you marry the high level players that like are going to be very nitpicky about certain things, like the engineers, and you were able to marry them with like the more salespeople, the people who want to create content and the narratives,
Mm-hmm.
you can get something really good out of that if there's a little bit more collaboration and a lot more adversaries. So I think that's like one of the things I like really wish for, because like yeah, I was a top 100 player, but my level of insight, I'm using my like intuition to kind of create the narrative, and I think that's the one unique skill like carry in the space is like I kind of have the both worlds. It's like where I know how to like make a story, and I also was once a top player, but my skill set as a top player is like deteriorating by the year. And I think what I wish down the road is like there's like a willingness of more top players kind of branching into that storytelling space other than just like kind of talking on stream about certain things.
Would this be like specifically commentary or just general like YouTube, or what would you be thinking for this?
I mean, I just think that with like YouTube long form content or even the stories that like you guys do as Melee Stats, like just having people who aren't going to nitpick for the sake of nitpicking and creating like kind of controversy on Twitter, like I think the insight that they carry also kind of can illuminate narratives that like I'm not going to be able to see, right? Um, that you guys aren't able to see, right? Because we don't really have the eye for it. And so like I think there's even more interesting stories out there that like only a very select few people in the melee population can see. And I think if those were, I don't know what they are, um, but um, but seeing that illuminated, we're like, I don't know, they're like messaging you and they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm just seeing this like these like 6 adaptations. This is so like insane, right? Like it's kind of like I feel like I'm like Krillin, like watching the Saiyans fight, and like I don't even know what's going on, but like Vegeta is like really mesmerized by something. Like I feel like there's something there that isn't being told because like I don't understand like what's going on.
Not often you hear people willingly say that they are the Krillins.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is okay. Okay, I remember why this is a conversation point for me, because Mango and I, we go even during the pandemic, we go out to eat more or less once a month, and usually in that conversation, I go like, "What do you think about Melee now?" And I'll eventually kind of tell you guys in our Discord like what like Melee Mango thinks about different things, different characters, but the ideas he's like telling me, like I'm always leaving the conversation with my mind blown by like 10 different things he's like telling me about the progression of Melee, how he thinks about certain players, what has his player style evolved into, how like Cody's evolved, and like where Cody like falls short, like things that like no one else can really see. And or he tells me like how he feels about mix-ups, right? Like how he's able to like call out a no other Falco can forward smash the way he does and like get away, like forward smash a dash backing Zane or a dash backing Hungrybox and getting away with it. Like where he's in front of another person holding shield, and for whatever reason, he forward smashes a shielding opponent, and somehow at that exact moment, Zane is dashing backwards and just dies at 70, right? Like, and then when I hear his explanation for it and like the insight to the mix up on why he chooses his options, I'm just like, my mind is so blown away, like by like
Yeah,
how many little things he notices that I just don't see.
I heard he was. I mean, I think that just might be what he does to everyone. He might just naturally do that. I remember Logan talking about it on commentary. It's just like, I forget what exactly it was. It was something about like reading an opponent's drift when they're in the magnifying glass at the top, or you know when they're coming down. And
Oh, that's
Logan was
Kodorin, right?
uh, sure, it was one Marth. I guess
Yeah.
all the Marths are the same. But whoever it was, you know, said that it blew their mind, and that's probably the effect that Mango has on a lot of people. You know, the way that he sees the game. I'm not sure if I would have said that he was able to have this longevity. You know, when I got into the scene, if it kind of felt like a kind of a player who was playing his own game, and I think that a lot of times people were unsure of how long that was going to last, and it's pretty obvious that like, well, it who knows what the future might hold, but it's at least staying true right now. So I guess like the next question I have for you is someone who you've been through the Mango coaching, you're very close to him as a player, for both Mango and the scene at large. Like, what does the future of Melee hold?
I mean, I
Big
think
question.
like
Sorry, I know.
I mean, I think like, you know, so I experienced multiple errors where like, there was a mass exodus, right? Like '07 when most of that top 8 from MLG Las Vegas disappeared, right? We're like, okay, like who's gonna come and replace these players? And I think we had that with the gods, right? Like Armada doesn't play anymore, Mewtwo King doesn't play anymore, PP doesn't really, they're not really known for playing. And I think everybody kind of felt like, well, like who's gonna carry the torch? And you're just seeing a couple people rise up, and like we're in a Melee world where 3 of our 5 biggest guys like left, and it's still holding strong. And I think that's just a really good sign that like, I mean, it's cliche, but like Melee is like effectively timeless. Like I don't know what stops the game in the community. Like I thought that if all 5 gods left, like okay, that's kind of it. Like what else do
Mhm.
we talk about? But it's still carrying on.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the Smash Summit 11 podcast. Like the idea of someone who only watches the big events, your Genesis, your big houses, your summits. Watching Summit 11, probably haven't watched Melee since Summit 9. Maybe caught some news here or there of like Zane's Roy or something like that. But yeah, the idea of seeing the progression during the pandemic, even when people could only play online, and seeing that all, yeah, it's just like so clear to me. It really reinforces this worldview that I've had about Melee, which I think is kind of a perfect thing to bring up right here with you. Is that like the people who are in this game, the roles will stay there, but the people will always change. And like I think that one constant is that one spinning red and black disc. Like everything else around, you have been so instrumental to the scene in so many ways, and obviously, I'm not gonna say I would never try to say that Melee Stats is like taking the mantle, but I do think that in some part we try to emulate a portion of what you were able to give to the scene. And I think you're right. Like the top players, obviously, no one can play the game forever, but we've been blessed to have so many people who just still want to play this game, even if it's not against Armada, even if it's not against Mewtwo King.
Yep, and I think that adds to the lore, right? It's nice to see like the what ifs, right? And you see that in sports across eras. I think fortunately for us, like, yeah, like my knees don't go bad and prevent me from playing when I hit like 30, right? That and the careers of a lot of like basketball players or football players. Yeah, but I also think it's good. Like I think everybody kind of the people who've left their mark, they leave their mark, and you kind of hope that people evolve on it. So like, yeah, like I would hope that people take my ideas, but like my ideas were good for 2014 and 2015 in terms of content. I would hope that people iterate and make my content better and continue to evolve. And you also see that with character development and play development, right? Like you take pieces from Ken, right, and you add it to your game. You add pieces from Mewtwo King and you evolve, right, and eventually you get Zane. So like, and even like the some of the other people that were really big positive net forces for the community, like Prague and Scar, right? Like they got rid of using the word rape, right, or using homophobic slurs back in. They were one of the biggest advocates for that in a time and era where most gamers were just like, well, you guys are too PC, like let me say whatever I want. I also help in the same vein of content and characters and TOing that like there are also going to be people who hold the mantle for being, I don't know, like a shining beacon for being good to other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been so lucky over the years to have so many people who are able to. Well, I mean, if I'm gonna say what we're most lucky for, we're most lucky for people who've been able to devote so much time to the scene. Earlier in the episode, you might mention Dr. Z. Sheridan has been able to give so much to the scene for so many years, and I think that a lot of people who we've seen, like really hold the community up, have been able to do that for a long time. But that being said, we have people who, I mean, Aiden did just quit TOing. It seems,
Yeah.
quit TOing for you know BTS. I don't think he has mentioned that it's not going to be a, he's not just going to quit TOing in general. Um, but like I think someone like that who has been in the scene for just a small amount of time comparatively has been able to make his mark. And I think all the players that we mentioned, like they have, like we mentioned IBW, we mentioned Zane. These are like such important parts of the community in terms of top players. And where were they a few years ago, right? Like it's crazy to see the development that we've been able to see from the top players. And I guess the only thing I have to say about that, or ask you about that, are you keeping up with like the general player movements, the general field of play that we have right now? Obviously, it's tough with the pandemic, but have you kept abreast of all the information?
I mean, like I think generally like, I have a decent sense of like the top 20 to 25. I think in terms of like the local weeklies, that's probably where I don't like I see like who gets like top four, right? And those are like common names. Like I see like SUJ Eddie Mexico, like you know, frequently turn up on the Tuesdays. But if you're to ask me like who's getting ninth and who's getting 17th at those
Mm-hmm.
tournaments and who's evolving, like I don't have much insight into that. So I think the equivalent of like who's like 50th and who's like 80th and who's like 130th, like I don't really have much of a keen eye. So like I want to pull the scarism if I go on commentary and like my co-commentator's like, oh my gosh, this guy's like been really showing up, and I'm like, oh, like who is this guy?
That's part of the fun, right? You need that energy. I know. I mean, talking about people who have talking about Aiden, someone who kind of not left Smash, but definitely scaled back on Smash to deal with Ludwig. Slime, I think, is in the same boat. Someone who maybe not might not be doing Smash as much as he once was, but he was someone who was very good about understanding his role to a certain extent. He would always message me and like get the feel on who certain players were, or something like that. So any information that he could take to the scene, so he could tell people who Sunsei is, which seems increasingly necessary in this world where you know it might be a online thing, or it might just be how Melee is going currently. But I feel like the level of play is like so ready to be shaked up at any point by any of these players.
Yeah,
Are there
and I
any
think
players in particular that you would think like fill that role of someone who is like Sunsei jumped from 98th or whatever, and is obviously super good? Like anyone else? You mentioned Logan earlier. Like who are the players that comes to mind?
I mean, I think I don't know if this is like me envious. Like I've always been a player that wasn't really known for technical, like I don't drop or tech, like or ledge dash. Like I'm like a really scrappy player, and like yeah, I think about the game. I think of game theory concepts a lot, but like what's held me back is my movement and my tech skill. And the one person like I kind of keep an eye on a lot because he plays my character is Ben. He has the movement. He's really fast and he's tech. Like I think he's plup light in many regards. Just when I watch his movement, I think there's a few things that hold him back. Where like I'm trying to help him out here and there. Like I'll watch his sets and I'll go over with him from time to time when I have time. Like and I think there's some like mentality issues of him being a new competitor that's not quite there in terms of mental fortitude over longer sets against better players, and some of his decision making in terms of like a macro scale, like stage control and like decision making, is not quite there because I don't think he's really learned those like kind of evergreen game theory concepts that I'm trying to go over with him. Like you don't always have to throw the first move. You don't always have to attack. You can wait. Like these are kind of concepts that most melee players struggle with when they initially play because they want to move really fast. But Ben, like I think if he can nail those things, the things that he like needs to grow from becoming a top 25 to like a top 6, 7 player, like are straightforward. And he's a player that I think that if he kind of develops a slightly better mindset towards things, like I think he'll get there. I think he has a lot of potential, and I'm really excited to like watch him grow. And I feel like he's a player that I'm always gonna want to like see like succeed.
Big Ben fans over at the Melee Stats world. Yeah, that's it's you know what's really amazing is just how, even though you said you being out of touch, you think means not being able to know the 50th best player from the 80th best player. That's so funny because that's like such a specific thing where it's like you know how deep you've been by you thinking that means you're out of touch. Like how often do you still keep up with the Melee scene? Because the fact that you are able to mention these players who really only popped off in the past year and a half, like Ben, like Logan, shows that you have some level of knowledge on all this.
Yeah. So I think it's like these days it's really hard to like, when I was really good about keeping up, like I'd probably always have my like Twitch running and watching whatever Melee weekly or major. I think I have less time for that. So usually it's like top eights. And if there's a really good set, then I can watch a few of those from like top 32 and top 64. But other than that, it's like really hard. I'll tune into like the Melee Stats public Discord just to kind of get a vibe. And so if they like mention that there's a good set or a player's trending, then I'll watch their videos and just see like what are they doing that's like good, or like what are they doing that makes them like a top 25 player.
I think it's really interesting to have that distance from the scene and yet still be able to look at what's happening. Mentioned earlier how it's so crazy how like all that has shifted and all the top players, well, all the now top players who were, just like the last time we had a top 100 might not have been represented at all. And I think it's really crazy how the scene has been moving so fast. How do you view this movement in the future? Is this something that you think is sustainable?
Sustainable in terms of just like
we have a lot of we have a lot of top players who just like through sheer dedication have been able to turn themselves from not even top 100 to Ben level, or Aklo, Logan, 3 great examples, like Pipsqueak. What if you want to consider that level top 20 or top 30 or whatever it is, throw in people who are bottom end of that top 100, like Sunsei or Kadorian. Like I think we've seen a lot of players jump up. Do you think this is kind of normal, or is this like a new trend in Melee?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like kind of a new trend. Like if we were to go back to 2014, right? I grew up in SoCal, right? I can go play Johnny, Mango, Lucky. I could go to Dunk's place, play West Bowls. Like I had so much access, and just by playing them, like improvement became very easy. It was just me going, like I didn't have to grind anything. I didn't grind punish games, and maybe that's like that's what led to my downfall. So I'll say this: let's say like my level of play is like a 65, right? Like at my peak, like by today's standards, right? I think just by Slippy and all the tools that people have, getting to a 65 is easy. Like getting to that relative skill level. The hard part comes in the fact that so many people can be a 65 out of 100 or a 70 out of 100, that the race to top 100 is going to be filled by a lot more people. So I would say to get to a certain skill threshold, it's way easier now. Like you just have more tools, and like people in the middle of nowhere have access to people now, and they have Uncle Punch, and they have videos to watch, and you can get coaching from players for pretty cheap if it really boils down to that. But I do think that top 50, top 100 are going to be a grind by virtue that so many more people can access that space of skill.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that kind of goes unsaid there is Slippy. Slippy's like a huge boon for anyone who is looking to improve. Obviously, we have a lot of people who are not in areas where you might be able to access a ton of top players. The ones we mentioned, Aklo, obviously New York, but never left New York to play Smash. Ben, super young player who was in like Minnesota Wisconsin border, which might not have the strongest scene, and same thing with Logan also super young from South Carolina. Slippy is the thing that kind of brings all these players together in a sense. we I mean It goes without saying that Slippy is such an important thing for the community, but I guess a question that you'd probably be uniquely apt in answering is like, how good is Slippy for the survivability of the game at the current level?
I think it's very important. The elephant in the room is the Delta variant of COVID, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing things shut down. And again, like, if I were to give it an like kind of a light apples to orange analogy, like, I look at how when I look at Melee, yeah, some experiences with going to a major don't translate, right? And the pressures of playing on stage are slightly different. But I would say the overall experience you get in Melee is like going to be pretty similar, right? Like, in terms of like the gameplay, right? My wife works in education, and the last year or two, through the pandemic, like, we have a global loss in the education and growth of people that go to school, right? Because the experience is just not the same, right? So, like, people who are 7 or 8 years old, who are 10, right? They're going to be developmentally very behind socially, academically. They're going to have a lot of unique issues, and like a lot of the growth of Melee players collectively, like, people are playing even more Melee. So I think it just collectively grows the scene, and in both the overall skill level of the game and also the number of players that are playing.
I think one of the cool things that we've seen throughout Slippy has been these I don't want to call it a renaissance. I don't think it hit the boom that happened maybe 2015, 2016, but we've seen a lot of outside companies treat Melee very well. We have For Loco Fight Night, we have CLG something or other.
I forget the activate. I'm so bad. I don't
Mix up, maybe.
That was the mix up, yeah.
CLG Mix Up, and also CLG Spikers Cup or something for the volleyball. Like, we've seen a lot of companies who, like, have been very supportive to Smash, obviously, but like, do you think that having Slippy as just another arsenal, even if we're able to run in-person events, like, do you think that this is helpful for Melee's ability to transcend what we currently are, or even maintain what we currently are, just based on like how easy it might be for an outside company to help?
Yeah, I mean, I think I look at it this way, right? Like, we're looking at it from a standpoint of the numbers, but like, I would like to compare it. Like, there's a world where we have the pandemic with Slippy, and the world of the pandemic where we don't have Slippy, right? Like, what happens to Melee in that alternate universe? Like, does the game just have so little numbers that like nothing happens? And like, the worst thing you can have happen to a game is you can't run events, no one's talking about it, and there's no experience. Like, imagine an alternate universe where Ultimate had Slippy, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to whatever netcode they had, right? Like, that scene shrunk so much because of not having like a Slippy equivalent. And even though they had it online, it's not even close to the same. So I think that's the biggest benefit is, right, at the very least, we're able to maintain, right? And yeah, we got these big sponsor opportunities, right? But like let's say the number's 10, like, we might be in a world where we leave the pandemic in like 2022, 2023, and we have to work from ground zero all over again. And it's like going bankrupt in real life, right? Like, there's so much recovery that has to come after that, right? Rather than maintaining whatever's in your bank account, right, over like the bad years.
Yeah, I think the interesting takeaway from that is just like how organizations might view the two Smash games, because Ultimate, maybe it's like, it feels like that Brawlhalla thing where it's like, it can't be that big. Ultimate has had like 1,000 entrant tournaments through the online era, but for some reason, you have all the entrants. You have, I think they have had some stuff with pretty big prize pools. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right in terms of like who is talking about it and who is like actually following that. I definitely think that it's lower for Melee. Does that affect like Melee's ability to get these sponsorships or whatever? Like, how big is the everything else that goes into the all the extraneous data that goes into a
Yeah.
tournament.
So
Everything that's not like tournament entrants or viewers. I would be interested
yeah.
to hear about that.
So like as a side note, like I don't think Ultimate's small, but like I think there's the way I would frame it just to clarify is that Ultimate lost a lot of potential in the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic. Where like imagine if it had good internet, right? Like yeah, they got good numbers, but like I would say that like the amount of growth they would have had would have been exponential. Like,
True.
and
Lots
I
of
think
top
it's a lot.
players also not playing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that speaks to your point.
Um. Yeah. I mean, I think the unfortunate reality you have, right? Like, is a lot of sponsors like like and I'll speak can't I don't I'm not NDA'd by anything, so like Yahoo, when I talked to Yahoo, Red Bull, right, like they were all very scared of Nintendo. And so um and I think in 2014 to 2016, just to paint a larger picture, a lot of esports organizations, a lot of companies thought, well, like, wow, we're seeing a lot of growth here, where will this lead to? And I think when you saw kind of the market correction or the market bubble burst on like Melee players and supporting Melee was when they realized that through the rumor mill, like I talked to every team and they're like, oh, like what's Nintendo gonna do? And they were trying to like ask me for insight because they were really nervous about like how Nintendo would destroy everything. And so that's why like you eventually saw it's like, oh, like yeah, like as long as Nintendo exists, like I don't see like much more growth than what we saw in like 2016 and like 2017.
Mm-hmm.
um so that's always going to be like the looming shadow. But let's say Nintendo didn't exist, right? Like there'd be a lot more people. There were a lot of really big companies. ESPN, was it E League, ABC, like all these companies that wanted to run Melee tournaments on TV, right? And they were denied for one reason or another. So like there was a lot of demand. And a little funny story was with Yahoo Esports, right? I think the viewership for Smash Rivals was like 30,000, 25,000, right? And that's pretty impressive, right? And I wasn't used to the esports money or like the corporate money, and I think we spent like 45 to $50,000 on everything collectively: flights, prize pool,
Wow.
filming, venue. And they were really happy about that. They were just like, this is like the best event ever, and they were really excited and they wanted to run more. Unfortunately, Verizon bought Yahoo and we couldn't run anymore. We were planning to run a Smash 4 Smash rivalries and run more Smash events. And I think fortunately the happy ending to this was Hunter, who now runs Golden Guardians, saw the potential of Melee. And I think that was probably one of his catalysts, like between Melee Science and Smash Rivalries, that like Melee actually has a diehard audience. And that's, I think, part of the reason why they took a chance as Golden Guardians to bring in all the support for Melee.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, I think that's going to be the thing that always keeps going, right? It's hard to say that Melee is a horse that you can always bet on, considering Nintendo exists. But regardless, I feel like the passion that exists there, I have a hard time saying that that's ever going to die down. So
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that's limiting, right? We spend 50K for like a weekend of 25K viewership. And conversely, I've heard of campaigns where they spend 500,000 or $1 million or $2 million and they don't even get close to that viewership, right?
jeez.
And so, I mean, esports as a whole is in a really weird space where I think collectively people are trying to figure out like how is it profitable? And I don't think anyone's figured it out yet. But at the very least, maybe it's not going to be like peak Fortnite, right? Where you just put Ninja out there and you get millions of viewers, you get every sponsor in the world to like sponsor because like a CEO's kid is Fortnite saying Fortnite, 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 right? But like I think relatively speaking, like Melee does really well per dollar spent on it in terms of viewership and publicity, and that's something that most other games can't say in today's day and age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. Like, is it just me being naive to have any sort of optimism regarding Melee? Do you think?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's just so much excitement for it, right? Like, and I think as we extend this conversation to broader esports, look at like how many people who aren't in the Melee scene that tweeted about Summit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my LCS players and my Academy players who are League players, they all tuned in to watch the grand finals of Mango, right? Like people from the broader gaming audience will tune in for like hype melee.
It does seem like an equalizer for a lot of scenes.
Yeah.
Which I mean, kind of, but the monkey's paw of that whole thing is, it's partially because of Nintendo, partially because of IP that's super recognizable and stuff that people have a lot of nostalgia for, especially from a certain age group, and then also partially because of the scene that Nintendo kind of hates so much, right? It's like it's hard to really pinpoint. Well, for me, it might be hard to pinpoint what makes Melee just like have be a sweet spot for so many people who aren't in the larger scene.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that doesn't really get noted, and I'm not going to advocate and say that we have 100% good actors. We had the Me Too movement, and like we've had our bad apples, but I think very fortunately for us, like, because like when you look at like League, no offense to League, like it's really hard. Like if I were to tell you like what is this player's personality, you'd probably be like, I don't know, right? Like, and I think the interesting about like fighting games in general, and one of the things I love is like the dynamic personalities that are being present to the public, right? And who knows, a lot of League players behind the scenes probably have interesting personalities, but no one knows. Like from the grander space of like what is this Valorant player's personality, what is this League player's personality, but with like Smash, both on the commentator side of things and also the player side of things, like people are drawn to them as personalities, and I think that's something unique in that we have as a community. That's a huge upside and something that's been lost when I look at League of Legends, and why I
Mm.
was really excited about League of Legends in like the old days was like Double Lift and all those people streaming and showing a bit of their personalities, and it feels like because we're grassroots, like we haven't been commodified to the point where we're just kind of like these like brand advocates that have to like stay vanilla.
Mm. Every week when we have our wonderful guests on, we do some questions from Patreon from people from our Patreon. And I think you asked one. I mean, you're kind of getting into something that reminds me of a question that was asked. So Vlurk,
Yeah.
who I will say has been, I think I've probably every time he puts a question out there, I probably use it. I like to make fun of our patrons for coming up with bad questions. But he has a kind of a good question with this. Okay, I don't think it was him. It was sorry. It was actually Algebra 123230. But Flurk does have a good question coming up later, and Samus players, I can't tell them apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Algebra like kind of wants to know what are the biggest differences between Melee or Smash as a whole and League of Legends. I think you're starting to hit on this. Like, is there anything else that you would kind of note for that?
I mean, I think the hard part, right? Like, and I'm not doubting, like, we can take it from multiple avenues, right? Like, and I take people from the league space into like the FGC space, and they're like, wow, this is like a totally different experience, right? So, like, right then and there, going to an Evo or Super Major where everything is open, you're saying hi to the fans, like saying hi to the players, like the players are part of the crowd, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you don't see that in League. Like everyone's like kind of barred off. They have their own sections, and Grand Melee does, or like Smash has like that VIP section. But like you'll see like Mango walking around and be like, "Oh, hey!" Like, and you see a lot more integration where it's not like a separation of fans and players. Um, I guess speaking from like a kind of thing, like I do think, I mean, there's a lot more money in League, but like also like with money, like you kind of get the like, are you playing this for the love of the game? Or are you playing it for a paycheck, right? And like from my understanding, with most Smash players, like they have to be in a place where they love the game, right? Because it's not going to be an stable income or reliable income that's worth noting for a Smash player. So like they come in pre-filtered that they must love this game. With League, like there's so much money involved, right? Like where you might get to a point where it's like, oh, the meta has changed so much, I hate playing this game, but I still have to play it because it's a really
Mm-hmm.
nice paycheck. I would say the level of stress is a lot more different. Whereas I think Smash players, yeah, they want to win and there's a pressure stage, but like the amount of stress that the coaching staffs, the players experience, like it's so brutal for them, right? Like every game, every week feels like life or death. Like you have this, like you have a season where like you're literally grinding, eating, breathing, living League of Legends like every waking hour of your life. to be the best. And so those are like the different things. And I think largely like it's a really simplified answer. It's like really comes down to like what you get from a grassroots scene, and as opposed to a scene with money.
So I feel like there's a lot that would go into the differences. Obviously, League is a team sport. League has seasons. League is bigger. Um, yeah, what would you say would be the thing that kind of might lead the like what might be the biggest divider between how melee players view their games and how league players, or whatever you want to sub in for league? Would it be just money, or like what would be the big difference in
I
terms of
mean,
how they individually view their game?
Melee, I'm not gonna say Melee is a perfect game. It has a lot of shenanigans, right? Like I think with, but the contrast between League shenanigans is like, I think there's a lot of aspects of League that feel great, right? And that's why you see a lot of people keep coming back to League as if it's an addiction. It is a fun game. I think it's an addictive game. Like I think people come back to it because it gives you that nice dopamine hit.
Mm.
Are we talking? And remind me, am I talking more about the similarities or like the differences of like kind of like how the players view the game?
Well, yeah, because I think there's so many differences in infrastructures of the scene and how the infrastructures of the how the game is played in the pro scene. But like, what would be the biggest difference between how they view their games?
There's like, I think that's like kind of like actually leads into nice like there's like, so being that I'm behind the scenes, and I see a lot of the pain points with like League of Legends players, like um I don't want to turn this into like a why doesn't NA like win worlds argument, but like I see a lot of their pain points that lead into frustrations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you've heard of like the ping, where like they're playing on 70 ping for solo queue, and then their scrims are 13 ping. So like imagine trying to play Fox on like a 6 or 7 frame buffer versus like a 1 frame buffer. So like the game just feels fundamentally different, right? Queue times are different. The solo queue environment, it's like a pickup basketball, where you get away with a lot that wouldn't fly in competitive. Like those plays just don't work, or that style that you'd play to succeed in solo queue. So I think one of the like most interesting things about League is that the environment that you find the majority of your practice in, and the environment that you actually play competitive, are actually two vastly different games. Um, I I think there's a lot of frustrations that build up. Like I would like to say that like right now, League isn't defined by your strongest player. It's defined by who's your weakest link. So you can like have your 4 other players do the right thing, and then one player is just constantly like kind of making these minor mistakes, and that's what defines a loss and like how the meta is played. The team aspects can be really frustrating, and again, I think there's aspects of the game that people love, but it's hard for me to really say that like that there's a pro player that loves like every aspect of
Mm.
League as much as like a melee player loves melee.
Yeah, I what an insightful. It's hard for you not to be insightful, is it? um,
Yeah.
Algebra actually has another question that kind of goes in line with this.
Yep.
So it's the idea about if you were to look at the biggest 1v1 games, which you would say like RTS or fighting games, tend to be overshadowed by your MOBA games, your FPSs, anything that would be maybe considered traditionally a team game. Um, so like why would you think that MOBAs, FPSs, other team games overshadow the 1v1s so much right now in the bigger esports? And what could 1v1s do to kind of gain more popularity or gain more like market share?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard part, right, is when you look at the one-on-one game, right, the scope gap is a lot more defined, and so you really get to a point where unless the game has a lot of variance like poker, that player that is better is going to win the majority of the time. There was a really interesting game developer who did a presentation on like skill versus luck, right? And in some aspects, a team game influence like adds variance and luck to the gameplay, right? So like on one element, like it's really hard to get into a one-on-one game because like you're very quickly going to know that people are better than you, and that experience getting into the game is going to be really rough. Um, you can or like let's put it this way, the ability to have fun in a one-on-one game becomes comes a lot later in the experience of your journey with the game as opposed to playing a team game, right? You can go play Valorant 5 on 5. You may not be good, but you're having a good time with your friends, right? And so those player bases are just fundamentally going to be a lot higher, right? Because people like playing with their friends. Like if I were to go tonight and go like ask my casual friend, like, what are you doing tonight? Oh, I'm playing Valorant with my friends, right? Like there's a fun social experience that you have with those games that bring in more players to play the game.
Mhm.
Whereas like I don't know how many people really get interested in one-on-one experiences. Like for what's worth, I don't really see that many players really. I mean, maybe I'm biased here, but I don't see many people enjoying one single player games anymore. It seems like games have developed into a social experience, and the extreme example is StarCraft. Right, that game is really stressful for me to play. Like I have anxiety playing StarCraft because of how stressful that game is. But I can either play that or I can play Dota, League, Mario. I mean, whatever multiplayer game, and I generally will have a lot more of a fun time. So fundamentally, player base is just going to be way higher than for the
Mhm.
reasons that I've listed.
Then do you think there's anything that 1v1 games could do to kind of increase that?
I mean, you see this like developer angle, and I really like how Korea Gaming does this, right? Like, because like with the Street Fighter series, right? Like people have played Street Fighter for dozens of years, right, or
Hmm.
decades. But like, how does Capcom solve the issue of like bringing new players, understanding that the majority of the player base are diehard Street Fighter fans, right? And so what you do is you introduce variants, you introduce luck-based mechanics, you introduce guessing, and you make the combo game a lot easier so that more players get into it, right? But you have to have this delicate balance of like, are you over compensating and introducing new players, but getting rid of the depth of a game, right? For what's worth, I think Guilty Gear Strife is seems to have hit a
Hmm.
really good balance where like it feels very accessible, but it also feels very deep. I don't know what the game development cycle or like how much thought gets put into depth versus like ease of accessibility. I imagine that balance is really hard to nail correctly. Um, in all this, right? I'm not a game designer, so I don't know how to do it correctly, but like fundamentally I know that a good game that invites more people has to have that easy to get into, hard to master.
Yeah. That actually, so we talk about what the games themselves can do to get to a larger scene. Curly W actually has a similar question about like what could Melee Smash fighting games be doing to increase the profile of community events in the larger gaming esports sphere. So, one is the idea of what can the game itself be doing to get to a larger player base, and then Curly is kind of asking a question: what could the games be game or community be doing to get like to have a larger sense in the gaming community, in the esports community?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that has to be done is like a funnel, right? Unfortunately, Arxis isn't the biggest developer, right? Like, and when you look at like anime fighters and stuff, like it's like you kind of have to ask yourself the question of like what is the way that you cast the widest net to fan bases, right? Um, I mean, I think IP is really important, and that's why Smash is successful.
Mm.
Dragon Ball Fighters was successful for its time. Marvel versus Capcom was like a casual button masher for a lot of people. Who would have thunk that IP does a lot? So I think at a baseline, if you really want to get that like massive appeal, like you need a really strong IP, and you need like a really big developer, right? And you have to have faith that the developer knows what they're doing, right? And I guess like the one finger I do kind of point to is like what Riot's doing with their fighting game. And granted, they have the Cannon brothers, they have people from like the FGC running it, and maybe they support it, right? But I don't know if like the other companies like have the bandwidth or like the natural fan base that Riot does. So I think it would take something like that. The other thing that is really hard is like, right, like I enjoy fighting games for death, right? And why I enjoy a game versus what the average person would enjoy a game like might be just too different, right? And that part of me might just have to accept that like what I'm interested in doesn't appeal to a broader audience, because I could replace fighting games with Puzzle Fighter, right? Like I love Puzzle Fighter, right? And people play it casually, but like puzzle games like don't have that large of an audience. So those are just kind of like my preliminary thoughts on everything.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a lot to that to get into. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your thoughts on that. That like being able to hear so much of that from you is really enlightening. I guess I think
Yeah.
is a word I used earlier. We could probably, we've got a lot of these great Patreon questions. I don't want to take your time because I know you're a busy guy, but I want to get a lot in because
I mean, I'm in the off season, so like it's not as bad. So it's like we didn't make playoffs, so I have time.
all right. Well, yeah, let's get a couple more because there's a couple fun ones here. As I mentioned before, they actually tried this week, which is which you should feel that you
Oh,
take that as a compliment because they didn't try for a lot of people. Um,
oh,
uh, so Flark, I mentioned earlier, I got a question confused, but he did have a couple good ones, and one of the good ones that he has is who is the most unsung hero of the melee scene who's not traditionally thought of as a player? Yeah, it's tough.
I mean, I think like I used to have the hipster answer that's like no longer hipster. But like I would probably say homemade waffles.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he's gone his videos, so it's like well known. But you said not known for a player, and I originally thought the question in my head, I kind of like misheard it. It was like a person that's not widely known. Um,
I mean, yeah,
but yeah,
if
I
those are
think
different
definitely
ones for you, then I'd love to hear both answers.
yeah. So I think overall, like homemade waffles, like there's a lot of like I mean, like I think this is documented by a lot of people that know. Like him creating the videos in the Brawl era, like was really important for this scene.
Huge,
Like,
yeah.
like when YouTube started popping off, it's like whose videos you'd watch. You'd watch Stab by a Nipple, you'd watch Homemade Waffles, and you watch like Prog's videos, right? Those were huge. And then like I don't know what the alternate universe would look like if those videos didn't exist in a time like that. Um, I think the other prospect of Prague that was really huge that a lot of people don't know about, like, of course, he has a lot of just being a good human being and, advocating for, LGBT rights, advocating just for a better space, right? And he'd play that disappointing father role a lot. And then, like, a new shenanigan would come into the scene. But, if we were back to 2014, right? Like that was the MLG circuit year. Was the year that we got into. It was the year that we got into E3, I believe, with Smash 4, and that was the year that we also got connected to the larger esports space. Like Prague was out there, like messaging people and connecting people. Prague actually connected Mango to Jack, who's the owner of C9, to get him on C9. So like there was a lot of really big behind the scenes trends that Prague really pushed people. Prague connected a lot of people to have jobs, to be on teams, and like Prague was also one of the biggest forces into getting people on Twitter. Believe it or not, better for worse on what you think of Smash Twitter, but like he definitely was ahead of the curve on a lot of the things that he brought into the community. And yeah, like I think people recognize Prague for certain things, but not to the extent that he really did a lot behind the scenes.
Damn, I love that answer
Yeah.
because I think initially people might hear of Prague and not necessarily think of him as unsung, but the idea of all the stuff they did behind the scenes, because I mean a lot of that, I mean even as I think that I know a little bit about the guy himself, a lot of that news to me, and I'm sure there's just more and more that that he did. Yeah, I really do like that. Would there be someone who is, obviously Prague and homemade waffles are both incredible answers. Is there anyone who might not be to that level of distinction, maybe level of just like notoriety in the scene?
I mean, I think one of the big things, and I'll think of a better answer, but I'll give a filler for now. Like Mutaking's quote unquote marketing. I mean, I'm sure everyone sees how much he spams Medify, and I personally think it's endearing. I don't, because the reason why I say that is the amount of work that Mutaking put in advocating for a spirit bomb was ridiculous. Like he worked nonstop to find anyone and everyone to donate to that spirit bomb. Um, that like sure, like Mewtwo mentions that he connected the speedrunners, but I don't think anyone has mentioned the amount of work he put into that. So that's an interesting one. Trying.
Yeah, I mean, is there any name that you
Okay,
can
so
dust
here's
off
like
the shelf?
I mean, I think Challenger's really interesting. Like, I think most people know him as a player, but like
Hmm.
he was a tournament organizer. He actually started one of the original rankings of like the US rankings with Hugs. Like
Yeah,
he's had his hand on a surprising amount of things over since '02, which is kind of crazy. Like if you I think you guys mentioned me as this person that's had this like kind of resume of things at the scene. Like Chillins had quite a resume for even longer than me, which is crazy.
yeah. I mean, what was it called? Diary of a Smasher, Life of a Smasher, whatever that was. I mean,
That catalyzed the Smash documentary.
yeah, exactly. Like, I think, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? I mentioned it earlier when you watch like a Genesis or something like that, you see all these things. Um, and it's to this day, it's still crazy to see the big tournaments that might have had 100, 200 people. And like you can see so many people who brought so much stuff to the community. The amount of things that people who are traditionally thought of as players or commentators are able to bring to the scene like throughout their years, always impressive to me. And I always
Yep.
love to hear all these old school people who probably are taken for granted now that just seeing all they brought. So that's amazing. We have a highlighted message in chat, which I believe we tell people that they can put messages in chat, and we just really don't read them. But he highlighted it, so we'll do it. So this is Mustache Walrus, who was personally introduced to Melee by your show Melee Science and stuff like the doc. And then Save as Untitled content, of course, came after that. But without Save as Untitled and not including us, who do you think is picking up where you left off on the Melee storytelling on YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. I don't think anyone's quite. Let's see. I think there are a lot of okay. There's like categories to this, right? Like I think melee stats and Turned Down by Walt will tell you interesting stories, right? About these really like kind of like hidden stories that have occurred over the years, right? So I'd view that as like historical, like those as like historical narrative pieces. Um, because like I think when I talk about things, I talk about recent legacy and I talk about kind of current events. I actually think there's a lot of people that fulfill that, right? Like you look at like the highlight videos that come up on YouTube, like everyone seems to be doing that now. Like you look at IBDW, Mango, Mewtwo King, Toph, like they're all producing content on like what are their latest thoughts on like this or like how did Mango win Summit, right? And that's
Hmm.
the content that I think I did a lot of. And they're even doing their clickbaity list, like top 5 players that most improved in 2020, right? So, um, as far as like the marriage of stats and the narrative, I don't think I really see a I don't think there's a person that's quite nailed the union of all three of stats oriented top player and good at narratives yet. I think most people usually have two of the three. And so I'm waiting for like a top player with some sort of analytical background that loves to write. And
Hmm.
it doesn't seem like that magic triangle really exists for that many people.
What about, have you ever checked out Junebug's content?
Junebug's content's good. It's just very infrequent.
Yeah, I feel like that's I think what the question mentioned Save. I think that was one thing that Save was amazing at, was able to just like pump out videos. And
Yeah.
I think Turn Down for Walt has also had like an amazing track record for being able to put out videos, even if you know like it's not the weekly grind, but like despite that, what he's been able to put out is really amazing. So I'm always really impressed by the people who are able to do like a full time job and then still have time to make all these melee videos. So
Yeah.
I mean that's just part of the game, right? Doing a full time job, coming home, and then spending another 4 hours a day on melee, right? That's just
Yeah. It's
the
time
melee
consuming.
lifestyle.
Yeah. I mean, like, and I don't know how often we see that in like, traditional sports, right? Like, I guess the Smash equivalent would be like, I would love to see a Tony Romo really get into like content, right? That'd be like the and like
Yeah,
him working with a stats guy, right, to like enhance his narrative. That would be like something I'd love to see.
that'd be crazy. um, yeah. Well, let's. We're talking about the history of the game. I think one of the, it's not infamous, maybe not famous, but one of the more notable things that has involved you was your $1,000 money match. So Joey from the Patreon, he wants to know, what did you do with the $1,000?
Yeah. So funny enough, so what did I do? Okay, so I won the $1,000,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they actually say this in the video. It was when Homemade Waffles and Prague like were counting the money. I brought
Yeah.
$100 bills because I didn't want to carry like 50 $20 bills, and like they're counting the $20 bills, and like I think Homemade Waffles makes this like offhanded comment of like, why did he bring 20s? So and that was a funny comment. So I won the thing. I immediately went up to my hotel room and I locked it in like a place that no one was gonna look because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to carry $2,000 with me. Um, I think as part some sum of money, let's say it's a couple $100, like there were people in my corner that rooted for me. And keep in mind, like I'm West Coast and we were in Apex, which is an East Coast event, and I believe Tan's from New England, so that audience was like predominantly rooting for Tian. Like he had home field, right? Like, um, do I tell that? You guys have heard the story, and it's a funny story. I kind of laugh at it now, but it kind of shows how times are different, and I'm like happy for it. But because I didn't have a home field advantage. A lot of people, um, it was a different time. I'll preface this. For like, if I got hit in like game one, people were like, "Oh, like how come you're not opening your eyes? Like you
Mm-hmm.
chink," or they're like saying like, "Oh, he's not approaching. He has a small like dick." Like, and in my head, I'm just like, dude, like Tian's Asian too. Like, you're kind of making fun of him if you're making fun of me for being Asian. But different time. But needless to say, so there are like a good handful of people in my corner, and some of them they immediately left the venue after the salty suite, so I didn't hang out with them. But like to my boys that supported me, I think Hugs and a few other people really like you could see them in the background of the video. They were supporting me, like they were just like would be like, "You got this," and I said like, "Hey, like I'm just gonna buy like, all the rounds of drinks that night." And so I probably spent a few $100s that night on shots. Funny enough was that I was sitting at a table with my boys and Tian's table with his boys consoling him were like two tables down. So it was an awkward bar night where like we're all cheering, we're all excited. Like Prague's there, Hugs is there, like a lot of the homies, and then like I see like two tables down, like I see like Tian, and then I feel kind of bad for him, but I'm just like this is my moment. Um, so I bring the money home. I still have $2,000 in cash because I bought, I paid the bar tab on card. I just left it on my desk for months. I didn't go to the ATM, and eventually I was just like, okay, like what am I gonna do with this? And eventually I bought myself a leather jacket for like $800. It's
Oh
a really
damn.
it's really nice. I'll describe it a bit. I think it uses like it has a sheep like it has like a sheepskin interior. It's like really light, and LA gets really hot, so makes a really good nighttime jacket. I still have to repair the zipper, but I don't really need to zip it up anyway, so it still works. But it's a nice like light leather jacket that I can take out to wear like at almost all times of the year in LA, and I still wear it.
You still have it? Well, yeah, that's great. We
Yeah,
got a whatever next event. I've got a leather jacket too. Not an $800 leather jacket,
yeah.
but I'll bring my $200 leather jacket, and we can we'll put on some sunglasses, hang out in front of the venue. Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Uh, so many funny stories behind all that.
So it was a bar tab and a leather jacket is the short end of it.
Hey, dude, if I had $1,000, that's probably go to the same thing. So,
Yeah,
the money well spent. um, so kind of, yeah. I mean, if we're getting into questions, a little further away from Smash, so Divine Senator Kelly has a question about, you know, the melee scene might not have. We might not hear from you a ton. Obviously, you've been busy with other stuff. Um, do you still do puns? Is the big question, which I think I've already heard. I'm not sure if it was during this pre-show or during the show, but I think I already know the answer.
I mean, yeah, I still do. Like, I think my like players and my coaching staff here, like, they cringe and they'll say like dad jokes. It's funny enough because I got to prep myself because like my wife has put a 2 year timeline on me to have kids, so like I need to prep those dad jokes, and so like
Mm-hmm.
you might see like if everything goes right, like I might have a mini Tafo running around.
Well, you'd be very prepared when it comes to jokes.
Yeah, not with the sleep though.
No. I mean, all the work you've been doing, I'm sure you've had your experiences with no sleep. Speaking of your wife, Yamham wants to know when we will see more of these dinner for wifey tweets.
Yeah, I mean, I think since the season's over, like that's possible. Like I think just for context to like people who, I mean, I think you alluded to it a little bit. Like during league season, like it's a 7 day a week, like 10 to 12 hour a day job. So like
Jeez.
um you have 3 game days, 3 scrim days, and then on your off day you're debriefing the prior week and planning for the next. So there just really isn't like any time to like do anything else,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of crazy. So but the season's over, and so like, and she's starting school, so like, or she's starting work again, she works at a school, so like you'll probably see like me take over a lot more of the household chores and cooking, and I'll probably put on some like food related like kind of bento boxes again.
Um, yeah, I think we actually have another question that relates to that. Leon YCZ, I'm sure you well known around these parts. He wants to know what's the most underrated Korean dish.
um Similar to like the homemade waffles, I don't know if it's gone so underrated or if it's been noted as underrated now that it's overrated, but like I think Korean stews as a category, or Korean soups in general, like are just really underrated in like the kind of Western audiences, because like similar to how I view like Japanese food as just not like sushi and ramen, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't view Korean food as just Korean barbecue. And like Korean cuisine is predicated on soups. Actually, if you go like Korean culture, like they live off of soups. So Korean soups are phenomenally good. Not just like the tofu stew or the kimchi stew. There's like bone broth stew. There's like oxtail soup. There's an army stew. There's just so much variety. Um, and if you're really adventurous, there's a cold iced soup, buckwheat noodle soup called naengmyeon, which I really love, and it's perfect on a weather. It's perfect on a day like this, where in LA it's like really hot. Like I think it peaked at 100, but eating this naengmyeon, which is like really cold, it's like icy, like is so refreshing, and it's also a palate cleanser. So like if you have Korean barbecue or like any kind of meat and it's like really salty and really heavy, right? Like the naengmyeon after eating that dish after is just so unbelievably good. It just pairs so nicely. So I would have to go with that. I don't think it's really commercialized or commodified that well in Western audiences. I'm pretty sure most people don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about the dish, but um, I think the way that you can order it, it's a cold buckwheat noodle soup is like the
Hmm.
best way I can say what it is.
I mean, that it's kind of a fool's errand to convince someone to want a cold soup. But it, I don't know. I think you're doing it. I will definitely. I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to figure out something like that. We do have around my area. There's a really great Korean place. A couple great Korean places, but one specifically that I really like, which I've had a lot of amazing food at. And yeah, I mean, if that were something on the menu, I would have to try that.
Yeah. I would say the other type is like we're also big on like pancakes, not like American breakfast pancakes, but like fish pancake, seafood pancake, like
Yes.
um the, those are really good, and you don't really get that like a Korean barbecue restaurant. You'd have to go to like another type of sit down, but yeah, Korean pancakes, like they're like egg battered, like they're really good. And as soon as I find a place in LA that seats a lot of people, like that's where we're going if like there's like a tournament in LA.
Hell yeah. I mean, basically, we've been hitting on almost everyone's questions. We're kind of right near the end. Before we end this episode, I actually want to roll this back into Melee. So, yeah, we're right near the end of the episode. We're going to be talking about our plugs, and I think we can, before we get there, When's Melee has been something that has been. I think this is a plug for both of us. It's been something on the Melee on Me website by Ding for years, and then now currently is on MeleeStats.co, helmed by Pikachu 942. And one of the questions relates to When's Melee specifically. So this is from Curly W. Could a local focused product like When's Melee ever fit into a big esports organization's larger strategy?
Can a local product like When's Melee fit into an esports org strategy?
Mm.
Um, trying to think about this, right? The best like analogy I can give is like when I guess when we say esports org, we're talking about a team, right? Like not like a developer.
That's
Um,
yeah.
okay, so with a team, I think what you can do, right? Little known fact, TSM. Like we think of 100 Thieves, for example, as like a merchandise org, right? Like or they've evolved into this, right? TSM, strangely enough, doesn't make money. Like to my knowledge, they don't make money off their esports. They make money off of their websites and their apps, right? So they're a technology company first, and an esports org second. If you really look at like how they make money, so the way I see it is that if an esports organization can market something like When's Melee and like it becomes a site that develops users because tournament organizers are putting their tournaments on the site, and people who play Melee go to that site for information, then you might get enough eyes that you can kind of bundle it as like and put like ads or something on it. That's one possibility. The one thing that I would also say is that like the closest thing you probably have that isn't like Smash GG is juked.gg.
Oh
Like
yeah,
the
yeah.
thing, like I would say Juke GG is probably the closest thing. And if they, I think the hard part with the local space is that there's so much onboarding that you have to do with TOs to like get a bunch of people to use your platform, like at the local level, and the payoff isn't that great because like every person that you onboard's hours of work for like 50, if even viewers or 50 people to click the site. That I think that's probably why a lot of people don't really want to find like every tournament in like every state, because it's a lot of work to get that working. It would have to be a philanthropic thing of a person that's really a big fan of Melee that
Mm-hmm.
wants to tackle that project.
Yeah, it seems like it's a large order to fill, but I don't know. On an optimistic end of that, I feel like the arrow of time points towards the fanaticism of Melee. So we will see.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So obviously, I mentioned that When's Melee is a plug. for both of us. Before we get into that, we're nearing the end of the episode, so I want you to plug whatever you want. But before we get into that, we have a little bit of a segment that we do because I know that you are um, obviously kind of disconnected from Smash, if not personally, from definitely a public level. But one thing I think is really important is to see people who are in Melee as something other than Melee. So every week we want to talk about something that has been in our lives recently that is not Melee related, and kind of an effort to view us as something more. So I can go first if you want to
Sure.
try and think of something. Um, so I think I don't know. It's a weird answer. This is Edwin gave an answer one time that was not really something to be that he was interested in it, but it was okay. Well, my answer. Okay. My friend just got married today. He got married on a Zoom wedding. It was international. I was not able to go, but that was beautiful. I guess the cop out answer, kind of, because it's like, oh, I'm into true love. But it was really a beautiful ceremony, and being able to even watch something like that on Zoom was still touching. And the complete 180, that was the answer that I don't think really fits the bill. I will give an answer that fits the bill, but it's not as touching. Uh, HBO Max, I believe you can find it on, recently has a documentary series about like full length music documentaries, and there's one about Woodstock '99, which is just like this concert of it was purported to be the next big thing, and it was huge, and lots and lots of things that led to disaster, including a riot that basically had them everyone fleeing at the end. So I will recommend that to anyone who is vaguely interested in that. I think it's a really cool time capsule of the late '90s, early 2000s, without like taking too many pot shots, which I think is kind of part and parcel for the for that how we view that era of music. And just anyone who's like generally interested in that time, I think it's a super cool documentary. So I guess my answers will be True Love and Woodstock '99, Peace, Love, and Rage on HBO Max.
So am I like recommending a TV show then, or we're
You're
just recommending?
recommending whatever. I mean, I've recommended I recommended a TV show here. I've recommended I got a camera. That was something. It's not even a recommendation. It's just something like what has been something that you've been interested in. One time I just said going on walks in public parks, like anything that has been in your life that you wouldn't consider melee related, or we'll throw in League, just since it's you.
Yeah, I mean, I think like for me, like I've tweeted out about this lately, but like I've been on the Orange Theory grind. I think the nice thing about it is I like data. I'm a nerd. I wear like they have you wear a heart rate monitor and it tracks like how much you ran, like progress on milestones. So it's been like a really nice experience to just get away from work. Um, I guess I learned that when I don't want to think, paying someone to yell at me fits the bill because I'm just like doing whatever they're telling me. But yeah, it's been good. Definitely the first week was miserable because I had no cardio, and but I love the sense of accomplishment it gives me. Like I think I went from a 14-minute mile to like a 6:58 in like 3 months.
Damn.
Uh, so that's been cool. I'm also low key doing it because I snore. I am so for context, I'm about like 183 right now. I peaked at like 196 during COVID, and I snore a lot when I'm heavier. So like my wife was definitely not happy about that. So I'm trying to get to a weight where I'm not like really snoring and like having sleep apnea. So that's one of the other drivers. But it's been fun. Definitely love the sense of accomplishment and being in an environment where because they're doing it and waking up early, like I also need to uh, try hard. One of the things that they do towards the end is like it's funny, right? Because I usually go to the early classes. They're like when you're at the last end of your run, they're like, you didn't wake up and come here to give half the effort, did you? You didn't wake up at like 7 o'clock to come here and not give it your all. And I'm like, you're right. Okay. Like, but it's been great.
That sounds great. I know Homemade Waffles had a similar answer last week about fitness, and man, I can't wait. I don't know when I'm going to be able to see you at any point in the future, but yeah, whatever major next. Hey, I'll join you on there. Well, two of us will be jacked. We'll be wearing our leather jackets, just wandering around the venue.
Super down.
So you talked about how you tweeted about this. Where can we find your Twitter? Where can we find anything else that you've been doing? Like where could people follow you?
Yeah, Tafokints on Twitter. Although I'm low key, just because who would have thunk that League fans are very angry people? So I'm kind of laying low right now, but I will eventually start tweeting again. Eventually. Also, Tafokints on Twitter or on Twitch. I might start streaming again soon now that the season's over.
Do you still upload videos?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a new skin of Tetris 99 coming out, featuring Skyward Sword. So like, I usually put up a video when a new skin comes out.
Sick. So we can. Are you still Tafikins Tetris over there? What is your YouTube? Where can people find you?
And I think if you like, I think it's just Tafokints now.
Oh, okay.
Like I changed it because I learned that I play more than just Tetris. Poor branding.
Awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, you can follow him there. Melee stats, obviously. I love to do the plug so Edwin doesn't spend 100 hours on it. So not really a choice today on this one person episode. So if you were liking the content that we were making, you can watch our full length video essays. Melee Stats on YouTube. If you want to watch stuff like this, our podcast or extras that we might sometimes put up, you can go on Melee Stats Archive on YouTube. If you want to watch our podcast live, twitch.tv/Melee Stats. And tweets such as daily reporting. It's going to be over at twitter.com/Melee Stats Pod. And Monday Morning Marth and When's Melee, weekly articles that we have, you can find over on meleestats.co. If you just want to support us, patreon.com/Melee Stats. Tafo, you've been such a joy to have on. I know that this is something that I wanted to do for a little bit. I wanted to have episodes that we kind of dedicated to people that we found very important. And I think that you were the one who I wanted to choose. And being able to speak to you today, I know that I made the right choice.
Awesome. Glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I hope that fans of the show, if you did like this, we would want to continue this in some extent. Maybe have other people from the Melee Stats organization, I guess, have on some people who are also special to them. So keep an eye out for that. And everyone, I want to thank everyone for watching. I know this has been a little of a different episode, but I think I really appreciate Tafo for doing it. I think it really ended up being something special. So thank you, Tafo, for being on, and thanks everyone for watching. Peace.